Hi, welcome. My name is Tim Reynolds. I'm nobody, meaning you're not here to see me or listen to me. I'm just simply here to keep things rolling smoothly and to make sure that nobody throws anything either from the stage or at the stage. I'm the moderator. If you have any questions or issues, you can raise your hand. They've agreed to allow questions throughout, but we'll try to keep most of the questions to the end. But if something comes up and it's a burning issue and you just really gotta know, the bathroom's out to the left. Actually, you don't need permission to do that. Please just go and take care of it and come back. So we are, and I'm going to read this because I have new reading glasses and I actually can. Welcome to the horrors and joy of horror fiction writing. And if you ever wondered what results when indie authors self-publish, and indie author and dark fantasy authors Erika, Knudsen, and Matthew Gillies are going to share their views on writing, editing, and marketing self-published novels. Ladies and gentlemen, Matthew Gillies of Flinch, sitting to my left, and the lovely Erika Knudsen, of Eris Publishing, and they're going to tell you a bit about themselves because it's better coming from their lips.
So I'll have to test this out. I'm not very good when it comes to public speaking.
It is.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Matthew Gillies. I'm the author of The Electric Home Dream, Master and Servant, and Oblivious Paradise. I specialize in writing horror fiction, surreal psychological horror, dark fantasy, and then, of course, with Oblivious Paradise, this is my cyberpunk novel. So I like to kind of jump between genres to kind of explore different spectrums of writing. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me anything about horror fiction, the process of writing it, even the steps on doing the self-publishing, because I know there's so many things out there and so much work involved in it. It's nice to know the best routes to go about in handling all that as well. So again, I'll pass on to Erika.
I'm even worse about public speaking than you, so this is going to be good. Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay. Well, I write within the vampire genre as well as paranormal. I like my witches and my ghosts and all that good stuff. So I have two series. I have my vampire saga and I have my paranormal thriller, which is about the witches and ghosts and family secrets and such. I've always been drawn to vampires. Vampires is my go-to, my passion. So that's my major draw to that. I don't know what else to say.
I actually do have a question for you.
Oh.
I'm sitting here and going, okay, well, you got a good speech going on there, but what I'm wondering is, when it comes to your writing, what was it that kind of influenced you to take that step to write your novels and become a self-publish?
Well, actually, my first book was only supposed to be a short story for a friend. I started writing it in high school. Started out as notes in class because I loved high school so much. And it just sort of kind of escalated, and I found myself doing research after I graduated from high school. So here I am, a student that doesn't like school, and I've graduated from high school and I'm in libraries. Yes, libraries researching, because there was not good internet back then.
Before Google.
Yeah, before Google. I love Google now. So yeah, so it kind of grew from there. I never set out to write a book. I never thought I'd write another one, let alone I just released a fifth one. So yeah, once I started, I just kind of went, this is what I need to do. This is what I like. So yeah.
It did. Yes. Very well. What I'll do is I'll even just talk about my thing. What got me into writing as well was I know when I was younger, I would always read a lot of Stephen King, Clive Barker, any of the dark, actual adult novels of the time. And the one thing that really drew me to those was they're very different as opposed to what I was reading in the young adult section. Everything just seemed to me was a little too generic. And then even branching off into, say, mystery or crime stories, those all seemed too generic as well. So I found that with reading horror novels opened up a new world of exploration and fantasy. And so when I started writing novels, it was mainly because I'd read so many novels that were kind of, to me, generic, that I wanted to explore something that I would like to read, which is kind of the influence behind all my writing and pursuing horror fiction writing as well. Yeah, so that's a little history about my writings as well.
And you mentioned that did you have some writers that you started with? Do you have favorites that if a book came out tomorrow, you'd pretty much be in line, whether it's Stephen King or Clive Barker or whomever? Erika, do you have a favorite?
I do, yeah. It was actually because of Anne Rice. I was such a huge fan of Anne Rice. That's sort of what kind of got me into writing. So she's my mentor, really. Yeah, so she's the one I'd love to meet her.
Have you read any of her other stuff?
I'm really bad. I've read all the vampires. I've read all the witching hour. There's a couple newer ones that I tried that I just couldn't get into. No, sorry.
What about, now I'm not trying to change the topic, but what about her erotica?
You know what? I wish I had, but I haven't yet.
And the reason I bring that up is because exploring in different genres can sometimes magnify what you're writing in your favorite genre. And I found that with the Anne Rice books, vampire series, that her stuff was, there was an erotic edge to Lestat and all the others. And I'm wondering if that came from what she did before the vampire works. And
Probably, most definitely.
And did you start writing vampire, or?
I started with vampires.
Started with vampire, and
Yeah.
you stayed within that with the 5 books.
I know I do have a paranormal. I have a series about witches as well, and ghosts and stuff.
And you find that each of the earlier pieces sort of, as you research, feeds into more and more, like maybe not erotica, but mystery or romance, or it may be a horror, but it's not necessarily just a horror.
Yeah, it's the vampire series is much more it's darker in moments. It's very sexual. It's also a good way to describe it is it's like an addiction. So there's a lot of struggle. There's a lot of issues too between maker and child as well. So there's a lot of different things that meld together.
It's almost like, what I'm getting out of that is it almost sounds like there's kind of that fraternal struggle with the child kind of developing into the rebellious teenage phases in the writing with that. And I noticed that was almost like with your book, because I've read Erika's first novel there, and the one thing I always I noticed quickly with this, it's not like Twilight where the vampires sparkle and to me that just seemed a little odd when I first saw it in the theater. Rob's telling Bella, "Oh, I've got something spectacular to tell you," and I thought, "Oh, geez, he's going to step in the light. I'm going to see a hideous monster. This is going to be great." And then all of a sudden he starts sparkling, and I'm going,
That's so scary.
I'm not too sure about that. But the thing I like about with Erika's novels is they do take that traditional vampire feel. Same with the kind of going back to the Anne Rice style, where they're not all about the sparkly romantic teen angst type thing. It's more going to the mythology of it and creating that excellent mythos that Bram Stoker started. And that was my little interjection there.
That's beautiful.
Matthew, who would you read if it came out with a new book tomorrow?
Oh, and you know what? I'm dead excited for this because Clive Barker is coming out with Scarlet Gospels in May. And I've been dying to get this book for the longest time because he's been working on it for years now. So, Clive Barker, mainly...
Is that the new Hellraiser?
Yes.
Yes.
And the great thing about that, and the thing I like about Clive Barker is he does explore the dark fantasy type worlds and landscapes, and different monstrous characters. And that was one thing I've always noticed with the horror genre is it's really lacking in those creative monsters now. What we see a lot of is the zombie stories. The zombies are so popular now that the market's very, very saturated with zombie stories. And you know, Walking Dead's a great show, love the show, comics are amazing, but we get so many books that are coming out that are zombie oriented that's, okay, how can we make this different? They're all going to be the same. You gotta survive against a zombie world, and you gotta try and figure out how you're going to live off the land without technology, without grocery stores. So the thing I like about dark fantasy or even the horror genre is with those monsters, it gives us a chance to explore something new instead of just rehashing the same thing over and over again.
I actually just want to add something.
Oh yeah.
Because he's saying about zombies being oversaturated, it's very popular and such. Me writing about vampires, it's extremely saturated. Twilight was a good thing and a very bad thing for me. I started obviously before Twilight, many years before Twilight came out, and it was actually really hard to actually sell a vampire story. It hadn't really come around again since Interview with the Vampire. And then Twilight came out, and it actually made it really easy to sell. But I had to always do a disclaimer that my vampires will actually feed on people. There's feeding scenes, there's sex scenes, it's darker, it's not a love story. So I always had to warn people, it's not for teens, but it's up to you if you want to buy it for your teen. I just gave you the warning. But now that the whole Twilight thing has gone through its cycle, I now am sort of getting the backlash of it now. And it's hard again to try and sell because they're stuck on Twilight. And they're like, oh, I've read so much vampire stuff with Vampire Diaries and all that stuff. So it's, even though vampires is my favorite, it is really difficult. And I do find that my paranormal thriller tends to sell a little better now just because of that. But I'm like, you really should have tried vampires because it's not Twilight.
It's almost like there's a negative stigma that just kind of fell upon the vampire genre after the Twilight movies came out.
Yeah.
I'd take her money any day of the week if I.
Oh, me
I would
too.
write the next sequel to Twilight if her money came along with it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Now you both self-publish,
Yes.
and what made you go into that direction versus traditional publishing? Was it frustration? Was it simply you wanted control? I mean, there's a lot of there's stigma going along with vampires, but also self-publishers. It's becoming better, but a lot of people look at it and go, yeah, it's junk. It's not true. Why?
You go ahead.
It's funny because it's also has gone through too a stigma as well. It's gone through a cycle of good to bad again. With self-published, it's always considered vanity publishing because it doesn't go through all the slush piles, and it's not looked at by editors and all this sort of stuff, right? It doesn't go through a publishing house. So people are like, oh, well, you're just doing it because you just want to have a book in your hands. No, that's not it. And then slowly, because the quality of the publishing, the self-publishing, is quite good. There's so many good writers out there. It's phenomenal. Don't even get me started on some of the fan fiction either. But anyways, so now it's come full circle. So it's a lot easier now with ebooks. Because when I started, there was no ebooks. I had to print. So the cost of doing all that deters a lot of people from self-publishing. So with ebooks, there was a lot of people who were like, ooh, sweet, I can do it. Now, in bookstores, you do have to still meet a criteria or they will not put your book into bookstores. So that sort of helped keep the good from the bad. Ebooks, there is really no filter. So we started seeing a lot of lesser quality.
That's being polite.
Yeah. Not to say that I'm awesome or anything, but so it sort of started the stigma again on, oh my God, it's self-published, oh, it's gotta suck. So you're always constantly fighting.
It's an uphill
Always.
battle.
always,
Yeah.
yeah.
Did you create your own imprint, your own publishing company, so that it didn't say Erika's Books? Published out of my basement kind
Yeah.
of thing? Or did you come up
Yeah.
with, you've got your own imprint?
Yeah, partly. It's also a business. To me, it's a business. If I wanted to, I could publish others. I have published technically a friend of mine who is a poet, so in the Vampire series, there's some of her poetry. So technically, I have published others. And I can do that if I wanted to. But I did do it because it's a business thing, and I also did it to sort of separate, and not to necessarily trick, but just take people longer to realize that I am self-published and then give it a chance first beforehand. So a little bit of both, yeah.
Matthew, did you try traditional publishing first, or why did you go the self-publishing route?
So with me, for the longest time, I've always been an avid writer. I've been writing for probably about 15 years now. Decided to self-publish about 5 years ago. Before that, I did consider going the traditional route, handing off to agents, to publishing companies. I actually did send some query letters to agents who responded back to me, and they said that they would always say the same thing. Just excellent writing, great atmosphere, love the characters, just it's not commercial fiction, it's literary fiction, so it doesn't follow that formula that guarantees publishers are going to be able to sell something that's going to make some money. So with my writing, it's almost a gamble, because it's not typical that you'll find this kind of writing style in bookstores, where it's like, okay, we know that there's going to be the basic climax, and so the start to the climax, and then the end, the happy ending. Mine kind of jumps around a little bit, where it's not going, it probably won't have a happy ending, or it might. Depends on what you want to perceive it as. So I like to leave a little bit of interpretation into the books as well. After seeing those kind of responses back,
That's what I call positive rejection letters.
yeah, yes, and that's pretty much what they are, because they want to stay a little bit neutral when they say, we don't really want your book, but if you do become successful, we want to be able to go back to you and not have burnt any bridges. So once you make money, then we'll come and we'll try and get our hands on that money too. But you know, my feelings towards publishing companies is not necessarily negative, because if the opportunity does arise where a publisher does come up to me and says, hey, I'd like to publish your books, I'd be like, let's sit down and have a discussion. But other than that, for the most part, I am enjoying self-publishing, mainly because it does allow me to control this, me have the hands-on approach to designing the book covers, doing the page layouts, writing it, tracking the sales, putting out the marketing campaigns, doing the Twitter, Facebook, printing out little postcards. What you'll see on some of the seats there, I did leave some postcards, so that's some of the efforts that go into self-publishing and promoting. But pretty much, it's pretty much just like what Erika said too. You know, it's one of those things where it is. I do look at it as a business. I do want to branch out down the road and be able to even publish people, or to give them the tools to publish themselves and help them on that path. I'm losing my voice here. You'll have to excuse me. Eventually, when I talk lots, I start losing it.
Now, do you find that part of it was the speed of traditional publishing houses, that you can, well, let's say you finish your manuscript, it goes through a number of hands, which we'll get to in a bit, and then it can take 6 months, or some of the bigger houses, what are you folks hearing, 2 years we might get back to you? With some of the big three, the big five, it can take them a couple of years to get back to you, and then you'll submit a change, and it can be 5 or 10 years for a book to actually hit the shelf. And self-publishing allows you to cut out so much of that, which can go well or not well at all. Depends on how timely. Did you find that that was a reason that you went, that, you know, I've done this, let's get it out there?
Actually, yeah, I agree with that too, because I know when I was doing the search with all the big publishing houses to send off manuscripts, there is a lengthy wait time. It's, you know, you're waiting up to, again, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. And once you send off that manuscript, you don't know if it's going to get in somebody's hands. Nobody's going to do a follow-up with you. You might get a rejection, you might not. With my latest book, I've written The Master and the Servant here. And this one, I did the plotting for it in June. I sat down in September and started writing it. So from September till December, I wrote this novel. I did the editing process in January. I did the page layouts. I did the cover design in February. Got everything printed that month. That way I could have everything ready for this convention. And you know, doing it myself really cuts out all that time in between, because you don't have people going back and forth going, well, maybe we'll change this, maybe we'll change this, and you're pretty much in control of everything that you're doing.
I just don't like following other people's rules, really, to be honest. Because I've actually just recently started, just for shits and giggles, just to try and submit a few quickie stories, right, like 30,000 words, easy peasy. And but my lord, trying to follow other people's guidelines. I'm like, okay, I'm at 37,000 words, and they want max 30, and I know they won't budge, and they don't want this, and they don't want that. I'm like, oh, I don't know. It's now that I've done my own thing for so long, it's a little frustrating. On the other hand, I always, I have moments, did I go too far? So you'll go hand out a scene to someone like, okay, read that. Did I go too far? Is that a little too far? They're like, no, do it. So, but yeah.
Now, to defend traditional publishing, the reason a lot of it takes so long is because it's going through the hands of trained, hopefully, trained professionals. But I mean, if you're going to Penguin Canada, it's not going to be, yes, a slush pile reader will read it, and they could be an intern who's at York University in the English Lit program, which is fine. I'm not knocking this program or the school, but it'll go through their hands, and it goes. So you mentioned changes and not following other people's rules. They understand their market, so they also, when they say, "I'm sorry, you've got to get rid of the shooting in the kindergarten," that's not going to work with the market you've intended. Because as a self-publisher, you've got yourself and probably a handful of others you trust. But when you go to DAW or any of the big houses, or even some of the smaller ones who publish regularly, you've got a team. And so how many people will go through your manuscript front to back? Because it's easy. You get objective. So you're not an objective critic of your own work, which I think anybody, hands up if you write, that'll give us an idea. Keep those hands up if you write horror. Okay, but it doesn't matter. I mean, I was just curious about that. But writing is writing. But we're not objective of our own. How many times, if you've written something you thought was fabulous and your best friend, who's your main critic, sends it back saying, that sucks. You can't do that. No. You've got to change your point of view in the middle of something. How many hands do your works go through before they reach a beautiful product like that? Erika?
Right now I have two amazing editors. It took me 15 years to find two amazing editors. I have gone to hell and back, I tell you. So right now I have two, and then myself. I will always do the very last read through, just to make sure, try and make sure that there's no errors, but there's probably always going to be something. The previous ones, I actually had even more people go through, but they weren't necessarily as educated with grammar as the two editors that I have now. So I had teachers when I first started. I've had people who are just really avid readers who are basically kind of betas. And then as I went along, I actually upgraded and I paid for editors. Very expensive. Find an editor that works for you, because my one horrible experience is I gave her my manuscript and she basically, we wrote in different styles completely, night and day. So I get my manuscript back and it is, I'm fine with red marks. Change anything, whatever, right? Don't change my voice, don't change my story. And these are the main things she did. And I will say, being self-published, when I got that back, I had many a moment where I'm trying to work through all this, and I'm like, shit, I suck. I suck. I should not write anymore. I'm not writing anymore. I'm not doing this anymore. I literally had breakdowns over that. So do not, if you find a friend who is really good with their grammar, who do that for a living, go for it. Have them beta through it. Give them a sample. See if you guys work together, because it makes a huge difference. Because really, if you can have someone that will just change what you need to have changed, tell you still when you're like, I need more description here, you're missing something. You have a loophole here. What the hell were you thinking there? You know, that's all you need. You as a storyteller should be able to figure it out. But if you have someone who's trying to change your voice, it's impossible. And it's a horrible experience. Yeah.
Actually, that reminds me. When I was younger, or not really younger, but a few years ago, because I'm still quite young.
Yes.
I'm not.
So I used to formerly work as a journalist, editor, assistant editor as well. So I've gotten a lot of experience. Went to school for journalism, and I remember my editor and we would always have arguing matches because I'm a very lengthy writer. I'm long-winded at times when it comes to writing. So I would hand in my articles to my editor, and he would hand it back to me with X's on paragraphs and red marks, and it got to the point that sometimes where I would start developing a little bit of a tick every time I saw these papers coming back to me. I was like, no. And so we would always argue. And one thing I learned with editors too is if you can justify why you want to keep something in, then you can keep it. Then they'll compromise with you. They might tell you to shorten it down a little bit, but leave room for compromise. But one of the things in the editing process that I find I do a lot of is when I'm writing, if I find myself getting bored of writing that chapter or that page, I stop, I look at what I wrote, I go back, I read it from the beginning till I get to the point that I stopped at, and then I go, yeah, I gotta erase this and start all over again. So that I find that process is really handy because one of the things I tend to edit as I write, and then after I do that, I go back and I read everything. So every day before I do almost like the Ernest Hemingway thing, where when you start writing each chapter or when you start writing each day, you read it from the beginning, you get to that point that you left off, and then you keep going from there. That way you can keep your flow going as well. And one of the things I like to do too is I do love to hand out these books to people I know, friends, family, random people on the streets, and say, here, read it, let me know what you think, and if you hate it, tell me. That way I know, and if you hate it, maybe you just don't like my writing.
So do you have an editor or two that you either pay or somebody who's
No, you know what?
skills you trust?
I don't have any editor that I pay. I should actually go out and get an editor that I should pay. That way I can throw them in there and make it look even more fancy with names in there instead of just using my bloody name throughout the whole bloody thing. But it's a lot of people will go through and they'll circle everything for me, hand it back to me, and then I go through and I go, okay, yeah, I can't believe I spelled there with the wrong there anyway. Why didn't I put apostrophe R-E? Silliness. But that's what I do. I get people to read through it, mark it, circle it, throw it back at me and go, hey, you know what, I found a mistake on this page, this page, this page, and this page. You need to fix that.
Any questions about the writing process while we're on that right now? Yes, Wonder Woman.
I have, I think I like to call it ADHD for writers, where like, I don't know how many, I'm sure other people suffer from this too, but like, you have an idea, and then you get another idea, and you get another idea, and you can't decide, you can't focus on one in order to finish it. Like, I have probably 100 unfinished stories because, maybe I'm in the mood for fantasy. Maybe I'm in the mood for horror. Maybe I just, read a really good, he's not that good right now, but let's say Nicholas Sparks' book, and it's like, oh, now I want to write that, you know what I mean? So how do you
There's an app for
Focus.
that. There really are some great apps for writers' organization. Do either of you use, or you had an answer anyway?
Well,
so
yeah, I somewhat am the same way actually. But what I'll do is, because I don't want to lose it too, I have lost ideas because I haven't written it down. I'm like, oh, I'll remember. 8 hours later, gone. Damn work. Anyway, so write it down, even if it's point form, even if it's like half of the story. Just write it down, get it down. And if you're working on it for a while and you have something else that comes to mind, write that down as well. If you're a person that can write from story to story, then that's awesome. I can't, but as long as you have something that's there, you can always go back to it, reread what you have, and it'll always trigger what was in there. That's what I find for myself.
Because I know personally for me is that sometimes I feel like I run out of time because I'm too busy dancing from 5 different ideas that I'm never gonna finish anything, and then it's like, you know, I just wasted, because I first finished a novel when I was 18. Had an agent contact me, and then they changed their mind and wanted. So and since then I haven't finished anything, and I'm, you know, almost 24, so that's, you know, that's over 4 years later, and it's like, how many more years until I actually get to something, you know? So.
I find I'm a lot more dedicated than I was when I first started. I find if you can write every day, even if it's 100 words, some days you'll have that spark, and you can write maybe 5,000 words in a night. Some nights you maybe write 500. You're looking at the cursor. It's not going. Don't force it, but try. It's an exercise as well. I don't know how to explain it. It's like an exercise for your brain. The more you do it, the more exercise you are in it, the easier it is to flow. To go into it and get out of it. Go into it and get out of it. For me, anyways. I might be weird. I don't know.
I agree with you completely, because I run into the same problem where when I sit down to write, you know, we've got so much technology at our fingertips now that Google can be my best friend or it can be my worst enemy, especially if it comes to maybe silly cat pictures. You know? Jeez. But the one thing I find is I run into the same problem where I've got so many ideas popping in my head. I go to lay down at night. I'm thinking of stories, I'm writing ideas, I'm fixing up chapters, I'm going, oh geez, you know, I wrote about this character in this page, and maybe I should bring them back 10 pages from now, or a couple of chapters from now. One of the things I like to do, my sister can attest to this, is throughout the years, I've collected notebooks. I've got stacks of notebooks that are just written front, back, upside down, backwards. Gotta look at it in the mirror to decipher the codes. Everything that pops into my head, if I think, oh, this will be a great story, I jot it down, put it aside, I go back to what I'm working on. And one of the things is when you do have those multiple ideas for, say, stories, and you're working on one, if you get an idea for another story, make a note of it, but force yourself to focus on one. Because once you start jumping between writing different stories, you'll never get anything done, and then you'll just go, geez, when will I finish this? Just focus on one story, leave your notebook, have a notebook, go after this one, I'll work on this one, or I'll work on this next story here. And that's what I tend to do for myself. It's, you know, I like my notebooks because they're great too, because I can go back to them as I'm writing and go, oh yeah, I want to include this scene where somebody steals a golf cart and goes on a little bender. And then I can add that in or fit it into an upcoming chapter.
Scrivener is good software. Anybody else in the room use that? I use it sometimes, not as often as I should. But when I say there's an app for that, I'm really not kidding. If you go into the App Store for Apple or even Android and put in writer or writing, you'll get all sorts of, there's one just on organizing your novel. Now, one thing to remember too, if you're bouncing around between ideas, they're probably boring you. So maybe pick one and see why is it that you don't want to stick with it. And it might not be ADHD per se, but there might be something in the storyline that you subconsciously don't like, and just finding the tweak. And sometimes that's a matter of changing the gender of a hero. My best story that I've had published at the highest level started out as a horror story, a man stuck in a coffin, but I wanted to put it in space. And I started to write down the idea, and I realized, no, it suddenly became a female captain, and the whole tone of the story changed, and I wrote it in days, the first draft, And it became so much deeper because I stopped and said, what's wrong with this? And that may be what it is. If you've got all these ideas, recipe cards, go old school. And don't be afraid, don't edit in your heads. What did Sean Connery say in Finding Forrester? Write your first draft with your heart and your second draft with your head. In other words, just put it down there. Don't care whether you're getting there, or there. You worry about that the second time, but once you get that out of your heart and get it written, and that's what you find is that you just write it, get it down on paper, it's sludge. You can scrape away the shite later to find that chunk of coal that you knew was in there that'll become a diamond. Another question? Yes?
How far back do you generally erase once you find yourself? You said when you get one, you back up. How far back do you go? Do you go right to when you found your board, or do you have some further amount of?
Pretty much what I do is when I go back to read what I've written, and then I get to that point where it's really where you come to the point where you go, this scene isn't fitting. Like sometimes you can find yourself killing yourself with over descriptions on a particular scene or a character's mood. I know when my first novel that I published is called The Electrocometry. When I first wrote the first draft of it, you read the book now, you wouldn't even believe that the two were similar, because there was just so much in the original draft that I just found myself dragging on and over-explaining, and I just went, wow, you know, I can just cut out all of this and go, hey, sum it up in a little short, in less than a page, and there we go, we keep the story flowing. So pretty much it depends on, you know, the way I like to write is I like to write chapter by chapter. So if within that chapter, if I find that I get to a point where it does stop and I go, okay, I am bored of this, or I am stuck, I gotta go back and either fix it up or see how, again, tweaking it, do I have to change a character, or do I have to change a scene, or do I have to change where the direction's going? And that's pretty much my process. I don't know if you have a different one.
I have a really hard time deleting what I've written. I won't lie. I'll edit the shit out of it, but
Yeah.
I will not delete what I write for the most part. Maybe or there, but I can't. I've heard of people going, "Oh, I hate this whole chapter," and they'll delete like 3,000 words. I'm like, dude, you wrote it for a reason. It's got to be there. You just got to kind of
change the file name and save it.
Exactly.
Definitely.
So I'm a little different.
Now, because this is a lot about self-publishing, your covers. I'd like to jump into the actual physical. Well, unless somebody's got a question about the writing process. Certainly, yes, go ahead.
Not so much about the writing process, but when you said like there are standards that you need to have the self-published novel meet before the bookstores will put it out, what kinds of standards might those be?
So the question is about standards that bookstores would have, that you would have to meet in order to get in on consignment. Is that what you're? What are they asking for that you have to? Okay, sorry.
Well, from my experience, anyways. Okay, so you go to the bookstore. Hi, my name is Erika Knudsen. I am self-published. Would you like to put my book in your store? And they look at it and they go, oh. They make sure that you have a barcode. They look inside. They make sure that you have all the proper information and your copyright and all that disclaimer crap. It's not crap, it's very important. If you have your CIP, your cataloging in print, that's a bonus, because I guess you don't technically need it, but it helps you, because you're in the Library of Canada, and if they search, you come up, and anyways. And then they look inside. Is it formatted properly? Does it look like a book? And then, actually all the times that I've gone to a new bookstore, not so much now, because I have like 5 now, and I'm known, sort of, in the area. I'm from Edmonton area, so anyways, they would actually take the book and they would give it to someone who's into the genre. And then they would have that person read it. And then they'd go, yeah, it's good, it's a book. So those are basically what I've had to go through. But yeah, the criteria, you have to have the barcode, you have to have the CIP, the proper...
So the basic professional standards.
Yeah.
If you can actually, pick up a book by your favorite, or pick up a Stephen King. open it up and model what you're doing if you're self-publishing
Yeah.
after what the information he's got. I mean, don't dedicate it to his wife, obviously. So Tabitha would love that. But yes, there are certain professional standards. You can find those online as well, I believe. With your covers, where do you get your images? How do you go into a store and look at the displays of horror and see oh, okay, that's what they're doing. Ooh, I guess my purple font with the sparkles isn't going to work. Or, how do you do that? I mean, I'm seeing great covers from here. The audience probably can't see
Yours
this.
are awesome.
Display that for everybody to see.
Here, that's my job.
Oh, excellent,
Yeah.
excellent. I get to rest my arms.
Yes, they do.
So pretty much with my cover there, I do all the design work for the covers. I went to school for journalism. I studied some designs, Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign. One of the things I do is I put a lot of effort into designing my covers. I use stock photos that I can purchase online through the various websites, and essentially it's just a matter of playing around with colors. Playing around with colors, playing around with the layouts, what I want to see and what I can try and capture. The cover for this book here changed about 5 times before I finally settled on that one. And it's just pretty much me piecing together what I can do creatively. Yeah.
I'm not a graphic designer, so I have graphic designers.
So you hire somebody?
I do.
Okay.
This is the paranormal thriller one. It's actually, this is probably the easiest one that she ever had to do, because it's an old book cover that she used. I always want to do something that fits with what's within the story, and there's a lot of conversation about family history, grimoires, all that stuff, so that's why it's a book. And the first one there, which I don't know if I found the button, she actually drew her. She read the first book and she just kind of came up with what she saw in her head. So I just let her play with it and I saw it and it was really cool. So, yeah, I'm not crafty in that way. So I just kind of let them play with what's inside and try and showcase that way.
2 minutes ago, we got the 5-minute warning, so 3 minutes. Anything that you wanted to summarize, or do you want to field 1 or 2 last questions, which could go longer? You're at the con all weekend.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you both have booths, or?
Yes.
Okay, so you can seek them out that way. If it comes to you in half an hour, don't be afraid to go and approach them, buy a book, and then ask your question. Did you anything you wanted to say in closing?
It's not easy to self-publish by any way, shape, form. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of dedication. Being a writer is a lot of work and dedication. There's so many people that I meet at book signings where they're like, oh, I've been working on a book for like 5 years and I'm still on chapter 1. And the only advice I can say is just write. Write every day. Get it out there. If you're never going to have that manuscript, then you're never going to be able to get to that next step. Just do it. One of the reasons why I did end up self-publishing is because I didn't want to be a little old lady with manuscript on my bed. I figured it's worth a try. No harm, no foul. It's not going to kill anyone.
It's one thing off the bucket list.
Yeah, exactly. And it's grown to something that I love with a passion. So, and I'm just glad that I can do this sort of stuff, right? And I will help anyone that comes to me at book signings or at my booth, and I will give information. I will help them. I'll even help them try and find publishers, even, right? Like, if that's what you want to do it. Follow your dream, totally follow it, because you don't want to be bitter with the manuscript under your bed.
And old.
Yeah, or old.
Exactly.
Matthew.
Yeah, pretty much what Erika said was summed it up nicely. Essentially, because we are running out of time, if you do have any questions that you wish for us to answer, by all means come by our booth. Erika's located in the Big 4 building. I'm located in the main hall. We love talking to everybody that comes to the booth. We will literally stand there for hours chatting away with people, sharing our secret, well, not really secrets, because we're sharing them.
They're secrets.
And that's just it. When it comes to self-publishing, it's not a secret, it's not coveted. We want everybody to succeed, and the only way that you can succeed doing it self-published is by being able to do it yourself and to know the information. One of the things I've always thought is, it'd be awesome to have a mentor. I never had the mentor. I did all the research myself. I'm sure you're the same way.
No, actually there was two fellas in my writers group that I used to go to when I first started when I was 19, that actually decided to do self-publishing right off the bat. They didn't even try with publishers or anything. And once I got my positive rejection letters, I said, well, why not try? So I actually, they helped me. So that's why I will help anyone.
There you go.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, Matthew Gillies of Flinch and Erika Knudsen of Erika's Publishing. Thank you very much for your time, for everybody coming out.